Hello, and welcome to the Future of Work podcast by allwork.space. I'm Ceci Amador de San Jose, and today I'm looking forward to chatting with Josh Brenner, CEO of Hired, an AI-driven marketplace, about staffing challenges, how to hire underrepresented talent, and why companies need to revamp their onboarding processes. Josh, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me, Ceci.
We're really excited to have you here. And like we were chatting just a few minutes ago, I find that there's so much to talk about in the hiring industry, particularly right now. There's a lot going on about the Great Resignation, the skills gap, hiring remote workers, onboarding processes for remote workers and how they need to change. So I'm really excited about chatting with you. But before we dive into it, I want you to tell us a little bit about your background, how you landed in the hiring industry, and what are some of the things that you're most passionate about hiring?
Sure. Yeah. Well, I think, as I mentioned previously, I think I've joined the hiring industry and gotten into the space at the perfect time. My background is primarily in B2B software and really leveraging technology in different ways to help companies, to help businesses be more successful. I've worked in a number of large Fortune 500 companies to help them from a product management perspective, build out their platforms, and then also created a few marketplaces and found that the marketplace dynamics, especially as you look into the hiring space, present really unique opportunities to help both companies and candidates in these cases sort of achieve their goals in different ways. So it's as soon as I found out about kind of the work that Hired was doing before I joined, I knew it was a place that I wanted to help take the company to the next level. So it's been incredibly exciting and obviously challenging with all of the changes that have gone over the past 18 months.
I bet. So tell us a little bit about the work that Hired does. How is it different than traditional job searching platforms and sites?
Sure. So Hired is, like you had mentioned, an AI-driven hiring marketplace. So we help companies build their teams by providing them with access to a pool of pre-vetted candidates. We focus specifically on the tech vertical, and we also have the sales vertical as well as it relates to technology. But what we found is that companies today have a couple different methodologies that they can use to hire. Most companies use inbound channels where candidates can apply for a job. But the challenge with that is they end up getting, high intent candidates, so candidates that are looking for work, but not always the highest quality or the relevancy to what they're looking for. And then on the other side, companies do outreach to candidates, as if you think about sort of outbound marketing. Companies use outbound recruiting to go find candidates that have the perfect profile for what they're looking for. But the majority of places that you can do that, you get very low response rates. So you never really hear back from the candidates. And so what we do is we actually provide access to a candidate pool for companies that have this combination of both quality and intent.
Awesome. Okay, so what I'm hearing is that part of your value proposition is that it's AI driven, so sourcing is easier, and you sort of guarantee that companies will hear back from candidates. And Josh, exactly. I'm going to put you on the spot right here. Yep. And I think that leveraging technology is amazing and definitely something that everyone wants to use to their advantage. But with hiring, there have been some reports that AI simply confirms existing biases. So it makes it harder to hire underrepresented talent. And I know that's really important to hire. I know you're getting ready to launch diversity goals. So
yep.
I want to ask how do you ensure that the technology that you're using is not biased and that you're not falling into that kind of like endless vicious circle of kind of like confirming biases that already exist?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, and something that obviously our team takes very seriously and has been a big focus of our, as we started to move more and more into the diversity hiring space, if you will. Something that our team is sort of very, very focused on. So first, I would say that we train our algorithms to be fair. We try to use as little information sort of about the specific details that are within the job description. We find that a lot of companies, although there's been improvements in these areas over time, sometimes there's words and sentences that can actually introduce bias into the job description. So we actually try to just look at it a very, very data centric way when we do our matching. When we do our when we look at our product functionality itself, one of the things that we found as we started exploring getting into the diversity hiring space in a broader way beyond our bias reduction filters that we have, that we've already had, salary bias reduction filters where we actually send alerts to companies if they're making an offer to a similar type of profile at a different salary to avoid any kind of bias. But we found that companies wanted more. Companies wanted to actually proactively be able to find underrepresented talent. And since this is something that was so important to both our clients and also our, candidates that are underrepresented candidates that are looking for opportunities, we wanted to make sure that we were creating a solution with our diversity goals feature that focused on first-party data. So what I mean by that is that candidates are actually self-reporting their demographic data, and we're only surfacing up underrepresented talent within our product when it is self-reported. We find that a lot of other companies have tried to get a lot of breadth out there and actually try to get a lot of coverage, but they use inference and AI to infer gender, race, and that's something that we feel is not really an appropriate thing to do. So that's an important part of our fairness and our we're making sure that there's no bias introduced into the process as well.
That's great, especially because I agree that companies are prioritizing diversity, equity, and inclusion right now. And I do think that remote work or the possibility of remote work opens up the talent pool a whole lot, in the sense that it makes it easier for underrepresented talent to also find work and actually be successful at it. And this is for mothers, caregivers, people with disabilities that have otherwise trouble getting to and from an office. So I think that's great. Going back to what you were saying, I find it really interesting when you said that there were some words in job descriptions that had some inherent bias in them. Can you explain a little bit more about that? I had never heard that, and it's really baffling, because that's definitely, or I want to think it's mostly subconscious bias that's coming across in job postings.
Yeah, it's 100% unconscious bias, right? And there are a slew of companies that have come out with different trainings and technologies to actually help companies combat this unconscious bias. One of the things that we've done, which I mentioned before, is this bias reduction filter that companies can turn on to actually blur the names and the faces and other information that may be that may sort of have bias associated with them out of their usage of the hired platform. The job description thing is really interesting, and it's something that you wouldn't actually you may not expect it. Harvard actually did a study that showed that job ads that had stereotypical masculine words like dominant and competitive were actually discouraging women from applying. Right, this is just one example, but there are a lot of different word choices that are used by companies that may sound really strong and really great as part of the job description, but may be causing, for various reasons, different people with different backgrounds, underrepresented candidates, from feeling like that they won't have a chance of being successful during the interview process. And so it actually avoids them taking that step to apply or to try and engage in the conversation.
Well, and that just creates this like ongoing circle of hiring kind of like the same people. And it's not necessarily because companies aren't interested in hiring underrepresented talent, but if these things are popping up and discouraging people, then it just seems like we need help. Everyone needs help apparently in that area. And so you were talking about your diversity kind of like filter, and beyond doing things like that and being more conscious about word choice and truly being very careful with job descriptions and all of that, what are some other strategies that companies can implement to attract underrepresented talent to their companies?
Sure. Yeah, there's a lot of things that we help work with our clients to put in place for them. The first one, I would say, is a big one right now for multiple reasons, but offering remote flexibility. I think you alluded to it a little bit in some of your commentary. Is huge for increasing diversity and bringing in a more underrepresented group of employees for a couple different reasons. First of all, at this point, 93% of hired the candidates that we have on the platform are open to remote in some capacity. And what we found is that actually the candidates that are open to remote skew higher in underrepresented groups. And we found that as companies open up their searches to remote, they are able to bring in more underrepresented talent, which is obviously really important to them. You think about sort of not everyone is able to afford or wants to live in a big city hub. And so as you start to open up the geographic constraints, you start to open up the opportunities to a broader set of potential employees. You think about, you mentioned a little bit about, working mothers or people with disabilities. Some people can't physically come into an office. An office may have physical, hurdles like stairs and no elevator. Also, just with working moms and the working around the schedule for coming in for an in-person interview may be challenging. So the remote flexibility is a key one. Also around something that we do a lot of is partnering with diverse organizations and helping our clients get involved with these diverse organizations that have that try to put on a pedestal, if you will, different groups of underrepresented talent. We work, for example, we work with a lot of them, but in particular, two that we're really excited about right now and have had really strong partnerships with are one called Blacks in Technology and another one called Techaria. And they're really just focused on setting up the candidates from that underrepresented group with the best opportunities, and so we make sure that we're always bringing those type of candidates onto the platform and also helping our clients get involved in different types of events with them. Events specifically with these types of organizations, but just in general, are really, really important. Something that we're seeing a lot of excitement behind right now. Different, specifically like career fairs, coding challenges that employers can put out there and allow a wider pool of candidates to start showing off their skills. We recently had a candidate-focused quarterly summit where we actually talked about salary disparity and helping arm candidates to really understand what they're worth. And so companies really like partnering with us in those type of events so that they can actually kind of appeal to a broader audience. And then I would say, just broadening your tool set, especially now in such a competitive market that we're in. We started the call talking a little bit about how it's in such an interesting time to be in, in this industry, right? And so, I like to kind of say that we're in this perfect storm, where we ended 2020. There was still a lot of uncertainty, but things were starting to open up a little bit. And 2021 hit, and there was just this pent up demand for tech talent, and companies were realizing they needed to just keep moving if they were going to stay competitive and keep investing in their digital transformations. And then, we see that sort of pent up demand in conjunction with the Great Resignation, right? Where candidates are actually, or employees and people are starting to, use the time during COVID to reflect a lot on what they're looking for in a job, what they expect out of a company. And so, the short summary is that companies need to make sure that they're armed with the right tools in their hiring toolkit. And there are a number of specific, when you're looking specifically for underrepresented talent, there are a couple of different tools that I think, companies should be looking at. Hired is one of them. With our new diversity goals feature, we're focused on, more mid to senior level engineers. There's another company that we really think does a great job called Canvas, which is really a complementary platform to Hired that focuses on candidates that are more early in their career. And so we think the combination of those two platforms really allows you to kind of get your pick of candidates, underrepresented candidates from different sort of career, parts of their career.
Awesome. And there are a couple of things that I want to address here. One, you mentioned that 93% of candidates in the Hired platform are open to remote work, and that number skews higher for underrepresented talent. Have you seen an increase in the amount of companies hiring underrepresented talent since the start of the pandemic and as they embrace remote work?
Yeah, absolutely. It has become the number one thing that our clients ask us about. And it's not only, I think in the beginning, over last summer when there were all these social injustice issues and sort of that shined the light, I would say, further on the disparity in the workplace, and companies have there was a concern, I think, that companies were only going to be this was going to be a lip service, and that this would kind of just be something that gets talked about and not acted on. We've seen that could be completely the opposite of reality, where companies are taking it very seriously. I know part of what we want to talk about is the onboarding process, but all the way from kind of sourcing to onboarding and being able to retain employees as well. Diversity and inclusion has become the number one topic of interest across all of our companies, and they're actually walking the walk as well, which is really exciting for us to see.
I think that's extremely important, walking the walk, the talk, more like it. And then the other thing that I found really interesting is some events where you're kind of helping underrepresented talent be more confident about themselves and what they want from a company and asking for their salaries. Do you believe that, or have you seen underrepresented talent become more confident when they're in the interview process, when it's time for them to kind of like lay out what they expect or what they want, or is that something that they still struggle with?
I think we're definitely seeing improvements in it. I think it's the combination of a couple things, I would say. One, there's just so much information available out there, right, about salaries, and there's a lot of different tools, including Hired has salary calculators calculator type products that we put out for candidates so that they can really start to understand their worth as they're actually going through the onboarding process of signing up for Hired. We give them visibility with the information that we have about their background, letting them know what, our product, our platform thinks that they could command in the market. I think a lot of it comes down to how much research candidates are willing to put in and how much effort candidates are willing to put in, which is, that'll change how they're, how confident they are. The other thing, though, is that, beyond salary, salary is one thing. And I think, this great resignation is causing employees to be in the more of the position of power, or candidates to be in the position of power. And so they can actually command higher salaries and make sure that they're being paid more fairly the market rate, and not take opportunities or offers that they feel are not actually in line with what's fair based on the market.
I agree, and I think that's why the service industry is particularly going through a sort of a crisis at the moment. 'Cause people are just not willing to take low salaries, even if it means that they're going to be out of a job. So I think it's definitely a movement that's and I like that it's kind of like giving employees power and empowering them to have more control over what they want, their careers, and how they move forward. And then going back. Go ahead.
I was going to say one other thing on that point, which you just raised in my mind, is there, in addition to just salaries and compensation, which is obviously one part of, a rewards package, if you will. There's this evolving expectations of what employees and candidates are looking for in their employers. And so, there's different types of benefits that matter more now that we're sort of on the, in this hybrid, remote first type environment, whether it's home office stipend or childcare support, or they really only want to have an asynchronous type of work schedule. And so we're seeing a lot of HR teams rethinking a lot of their corporate policies as well, benefit packages, and also that and how that impacts like their messaging and job descriptions and the perks that actually matter to people in this climate.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it was about time. I feel like for too long of a time, perks and benefits packages were kind of like a one size fits all, and everyone gets the same perks and benefits. And I can see why that was the way it was, but it just doesn't really apply anymore. Like a single millennial worker will need different perks and benefits than a working parent or someone that needs to take care of an elderly family member. So I think it's definitely important that companies start to personalize a little bit, or at least give more choice, kind of like have like a robust package and say, okay, so you can have your pick within these options. And then going back to what companies need to be doing, and you mentioned this already, is the onboarding process. And so onboarding processes had to change because the companies, the few that were hiring last year, they had to do so remotely. And that has and as part of digital transformation efforts, it seems that the onboarding process is still not where it needs to be for a lot of companies, especially in a remote and hybrid setting. So what do you think companies need to do, or how can the onboarding process be revamped or improved upon?
Yeah, I think, one of the key things that we've seen, especially in this remote world, is in the previous office-based cultures, you'd see people coming in on that first day. They would maybe get this warm welcome, see all the smiling faces. And so, what we work closely with our companies and we try to do ourselves is create a sense of community from day one. And so, we think that some important tips are that HR people and people operations team should plan to send an orientation schedule and overview of benefits ahead of time for the person to review. So they feel like before they start, they have a good plan in place for starting to get integrated and onboarded into the company. And it also just gives a sense of that the company is organized and takes the onboarding seriously. obviously. Obviously IT is responsible for making sure that they have all of their laptops, monitors, all the equipment that's going to set them up for success. We also think that companies should invest in a welcome box. Something that we're constantly iterating on and getting feedback on with our own onboarding is, we want people to have swag, to be representing company, even if they're not, in the office, get a welcome email from their hiring manager, and also newer, other members across the team to send them warm welcomes. If companies have an internal communication platform like Slack or something like that, to make sure that on their first day, they're getting a warm welcome from everyone across the company. And then, making sure that they, once they get past that first day of understanding, this is kind of how the company works at a high level, making sure that the hiring manager takes it down to the next level of granularity, so that that the person feels like, okay, I know what I need to do to be set up for success here. And we think that those are some key tips that have helped us and helped a lot of our clients start to be more successful with onboarding virtually.
Awesome. And Josh, we're about to run out of time here. So before we finish our conversation, I want to ask you, what are some of the trends or driving forces that you see will shape the hiring industry now up until like 5 years from now?
Sure. I think we're going to still see this trend of employees and candidates being in a position of power in terms of choosing what type of work style works for them. How do they want to communicate? What type of companies that they want to be involved in? Things like what type of social stances companies are taking are more and more important to candidates today. There's this skills gap. Obviously, digital skills are very, very hot in demand right now. We see that not slowing down at all. We see that companies are hungry for top tech talent, and they're caring less and less about if they're based in one of the major tech hubs. We're even seeing companies start to go outside of countries and in ways that they never really were before. So we're really excited about that trend. And we think transparency is a key one as well. So Hired, our vision is pretty simple, and I think it talks to sort of where we think things are going. We want to be in a world where all hiring is equitable, transparent, and efficient. And so we think that in 5 years, or hopefully it takes 5 years, but maybe 5 to 10 years, all hiring will be efficient, transparent, and equitable. And so we're not really gonna rest until we help make that happen.
That's amazing. And Josh, if someone wanted to be a candidate in the Hire platform, or if a company wants to learn more about your product, where can they find more information?
Just go to hired.com for candidates, both for candidates and companies. You can go in and set up your account on your own. And the great thing about Hired is that we not only have a completely self-service platform, but we have people that are behind the scenes to help on both sides, both on the candidates to help them be more successful, and companies to help them be more successful in achieving their hiring goals.
Amazing. Thank you again, Josh, for taking the time to chat with us today.
Thanks so much for having me. It was great chatting with you.
And thank you, everyone, for tuning in to the Future of Work podcast by allwork.space. Remember that new episodes are released every Thursday, and you can tune in on allwork.space, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and YouTube.